Then tell me how they start.
Hello and welcome to. So was der Bay?
Great. Welcome back
Okay.
to another set review here on our channel.
Yep.
Today
There's a new set coming out.
Exactly. Today we will be looking at Innistrad Crimson Vow. And we've looked up some cards that might be interesting for our format.
Yeah. Instead of digging up the old ones, the old and trusted cards, it's time to get some new stuff out. And the first card we will talk about today is Dig Up.
Yeah, definitely an interesting new traverse the Ulven world, probably, I would say.
Yeah, pretty similar.
We were discussing prior to recording which decks this card could fit into. Somehow I instantly thought of Hogak, since some Hogak versions played Traverse back in the days. Of course, the Delirium part is much easier to access, but this one is basically doing the same in the early turns, searching for basic lands and fueling your graveyard, and later on for a bit more mana you have normal tutor. Might be playable, but on the other hand 4 mana is quite a lot, especially for Hogak. So I'm not so sure about that.
It's the perfect design for a control-ish combo deck that kind of wants to fix their mana, so not really any deck that is currently played. Kind of reminded me of the good old times when Genesis Stone was legal. This would have been a pretty decent card in that deck, I think.
Right.
But besides that, I think it's a very good showcase of the cleave mechanic, which is new and exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably one of the more interesting designs that mechanic gave us, but probably not really an auto-include into anything. Just like a card to keep in the back of your head. And if you want another nice tutor for 4 mana to find your broken finisher, maybe it's time to dig up.
What I like about those spells, we will have a few more of them talking about later, is that at least the ones that we are showing are all at the cost of 1 mana, or at least you can mental misstep them, because even if you cleave them, it's not always a relevant thing, but if you encounter a blue matchup, maybe something to keep in mind. And I think that's...
All mental misstep targets are always great.
Exactly. One of the best counter spells, but that's something we debated in another video. So let's go to the second card, which is Eruth. Not quite sure how to pronounce that. I think that's correct.
The only commander we really think is worth discussing out of the set. A lot of tribal, other stuff is a lot of tribal related stuff. But that's not really playable in Duel Commander from our point of view, at least from what we can come up.
Correct.
But this looks like slightly interesting. Card adventure is always great.
Yeah, I think when the card was spoilered in the first place, people mainly talked about playing a Storm deck. I think you can also, or you should rather play a Burn deck, an Izzet Burn deck. I mean, the Storm game plan is definitely interesting, but I think the color combination lacks the density of rituals and stuff in order to keep going while using the ability, and so to say, drawing through your deck until you find your finisher.
Yeah, especially with High Tide gone. That's would have been a good card in such a burn deck.
Right.
And with that card banned, you're really lacking a lot of the high impact card you want to use to generate a lot of mana. But yeah, in a burn deck, you can use your cantrips to find 2 shocks or something like that, which could be kind of interesting. Also, the stats of this card are pretty great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
3 mana 2/4 is pretty good.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a cantrip. Like, just your normal draws already resulting in 2 cards, since the card is worded in a correct way, so to say. Says you can play those cards, so you can also play lands, which is great.
Yeah,
you just have a draw 2 every turn, and maybe that's something to look out for.
Yeah, maybe it's good enough.
And since Innistrad is a lot about wolves and werewolves, let's go on with a nice wolf. There is a cemetery Prowler.
Probably the least impressive part of this card is the tribe.
Yeah, that's correct. I think there was Well, we had someone who requested a werewolf commander brew once, but unfortunately, I think that's far in the future.
Yeah, probably pretty tough to build a deck around that tribe currently.
Right.
But yeah, this card has a lot of other text, and I mean a lot of other text, and it's very good text.
Mm-hmm. It somehow reminds me of the quest. It's not close to questing beast, but this behavior of printing a lot of text on green mythics recently.
Green mythics with excellent stats. That is.
Right. Right.
So the floor of this card is pretty good. If you just drop this as a 3 mana 3/4 with a dog on turn 2, it's pretty great.
Yeah.
And then you get to make your stuff cheaper. And that can be pretty good, I think, in like 2-color green decks. Mono green, maybe even mono green. But
Yeah.
that deck has a lot of cards that like are very color centric.
Definitely. And I think like I'm not sure about the black one. We will talk about the blue cemetery creature later on as well. But I think at least 2 of 5 have this ability on attack as well. So as Martin said, even if you drop it in the early game and you don't have a target to exile, you can get some later on by attacking, which is quite nice.
And it's very important for this card, especially since you're usually looking to drop this on turn 2. And if your opponent doesn't really have a target, this is not that great. But yeah, you can find your targets later during the game. And then you can, hopefully exile a creature. I think that's the thing you're mainly looking towards. Which is kind of weird because like getting creatures into the graveyard in green decks is usually pretty rough. But maybe if you play Gruul, you can bolt your opponent's creature. Maybe do it that way.
No, I mean, I haven't seen a mono green deck in any top 8 for a while now, but I think some of them play a few fight spells.
Yeah, but it's still like, that's not insanely reliable.
That's
but
correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
There are, of course, there are a few other ways, but that's like the main goal you usually probably want is to get a creature into the graveyard. And I think playing it in mono green makes it pretty rough, but probably still worth playing. 3/4 Vigilance, great card on its own.
Definitely. Since I was just thinking about, so currently some people are into thesis. Yeah, I think not even Kinky can pronounce this correctly. Anyways, the new Enchantress Commander.
Yeah.
There were 2 cards that we think are very interesting. One of them is Hallowed Haunting, which probably gives the deck a reasonable win condition apart from playing Emrakul, from tutoring it up. But I mean, there's not this one Enchantress deck going around. I've personally played against versions that try to finish by casting Sigil of the Empty Thrones, and then later on casting Concordant Crossroads and just attacking you with some Hasty Angels. This card is probably a bit better than the Sigil, so this might find its way into a few decks.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that this would be pretty obnoxious if it had a great finisher. Like, that's the main issue. Some people try to assemble Repel and stuff like that, but it's really missing that efficient punch to close out games. And this card is not like insane. I don't think this will like push Suitus over the top if it's not from its current power perspective from its power currently.
Yeah.
But it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And also it's white, so you can ramp into it with your Sarah Sanctum.
Correct. And then there's Katilda, which is a creature with Disturb. Not sure if the backside is ever that relevant. Like, yeah, if you slam this card, it's basically, depending on your board, it can be of equal size as Emrakul, for example. At least a very big boy or girl in this case. Whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty decent mid-range slot. It's good. It has lifelink, which is very, very good, I think.
Yeah, right.
To stabilize games.
I think there's a card from the early Teros set that gets buffed +1/+1 for every enchantment on the board. I don't remember its name, but that's another version, for example, I've seen online. People try to win by combat damage, some stacks the enchantments and stuff, drawing cards, making sure the opponent does not attack with his creatures. and then this card would fit into those game plans as well. So quite interesting.
Yeah, and the backside, you can put it on suitors to maybe like kill the opponent in one turn in the late game.
Right.
So that also is some decent upside.
Yeah, generally I like the disturb ability. I mean,
Yeah.
having later on in the game having another card, so to say, to play, or another option isn't bad either. So we'll take that.
Yeah, and with less and less partner decks, at least compared to the older days, I think like getting more value out of your cards is pretty important, since games tend to go very grindy, especially if you're facing that black CMC5 commander.
Tevesh.
Name I forgot. Of course, Tevesh. Yeah.
Yep. Correct. So let's talk about the next, or our next cemetery in queue, which is the blue one, the Illuminator. I think it's quite a cool card. It's like a future sight on stick, and I've been testing it a bit in a deck I'm currently running. So far it's quite cool. Like, it doesn't always find something to cast. Obviously it's not as good as future sight, but on the other hand you have a buddy to beat with, which has evasion and some incidental graveyard hate.
Yeah, sadly you cannot play lands with this. That would be pretty good, I think. That would really push it quite a bit.
Agree.
But you can look at your top card in response to the enter the battlefield trigger. So you can adjust to that, so you can at least get a decent chance of hitting on your first card if you hit the battlefield with it.
Right. And that's the second card when we were talking about those creatures that also exile on attack. And I'm not sure about the black one. I think the black one is quite irrelevant for our format since it's CMC6. So I will be honest, I haven't even checked it.
It says enters the battlefield or dies.
Okay, so it has a second one on dying. Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a pretty good, like the card itself has a pretty strong effect, but yeah, 6 mana is just too much for something that just like removes the body.
Yeah, correct. And then there's another vampire probably entering the battlefield, at least for White Weenie players, and he's welcomed. Well, it's a 3-drop that gives the Isamaru pile some card draw, or the card draw engine, which is quite a nice ability, I think. And
mono white card draw is always hard to come by. Like, people actually played Mentor of the Meek, and this is dimensions better.
Correct, because you don't have to pay any mana. And I think like the second ability, or like that this one is limited to once per turn, is not even that relevant. Like, usually you're not dropping like 2 or 3 creatures with power 2 or less in one turn, so it's okay.
I think if you're drawing additional cards, it can happen, but I think like it's a downside. But I think we all accept that downside and just run with it. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
And also it's another evasive buddy, and like White Weenie doesn't have a lot of them. There are quite a few now. Have been a lot added to recent sets.
Mm-hmm.
But that's always nice, since like usually runs a few equipments. So that is another way to guarantee you a jitter hit or something like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely interesting. Another card that I find really interesting is Scattered Thoughts, it's called, I guess. Something I looked at through a different lens, because Martin and me are both playing a bit Pauper as well.
Pauper degenerates.
Yeah. And
card advantage in blue. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. That's the mindset. And well, it's like they've printed a Fact or Fiction for Pauper, and while it might not be super relevant for Pauper, I'm not sure about that yet, it's definitely a better Fact or Fiction, and this card sees play in a few blue decks in Duel Commander, for example Octavia. And since the card lets you decide by your own which cards to pick, and also doesn't give your opponent information about which cards you've chosen, I think it will see some play here and there.
Yeah, I think there's been a small war going on between all the CMC4 draw spells. Yeah. And then Mind's Deluge came in and just destroyed all of them. I think that card is just
Memory deluge, right?
memory deluge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ahead of all of them due to the flashback. And yeah. But if you need a graveyard fuel, you might play this card, or if you just need another one, this might be the second best one that is currently available.
Yeah. Yeah, it
It
will
looks
be
stronger than Scry 2 Draw 2.
exactly. Especially if there are more and more like, okay, that's like 1 out of 1,000 cases in which you might get some, or like, let's assume some blue decks play a bit more flashback spells these days. I've even seen this card. It's called Quiet Speculation, I guess. That's searching flashback spells from your graveyard, from your library, and is putting it into the graveyard. So if you have some synergies with Scattered Thoughts there as well, it's nice.
Yeah.
That's definitely more like a minor case. Then we have another Cleave spell. And I think this one is quite a good card. It's a discard spell.
Yeah. It's the new Inquisition of Kozilek. Not really.
Yes.
It's very similar. We're
Right.
we're not 100% confident in it being on the same level as the other three staple discard spells, Duress, Inquisition, and Thoughtseize. But it definitely could be up there. Like, I think it's one of those cards that you just have to play. And if it whiffs a lot and it gets kind of awkward a lot, it might not be on that level. But if it's not, it's insane.
The question is if this one is going to substitute Eurus at some point.
That could be the case. But on the other hand, I think like the amount of non-creature spells hasn't really changed over the years. I think it's still like very, very stable, and usually you will find something with your Duress if you fire it early.
Yeah.
And
We will see. I'm a bit hesitating with the fact that sometimes, like, in the more the game goes on, like, you have to gamble a bit with the cleave ability, since of course it could be that you're hitting something if you play it for CMC1, but on the other hand, just to make sure you hit something, play 3 mana for 1 discard spell. Of course, information is great, but apart from that, I don't know.
I think in late game that's still a fine trade. Like if you would remove it, you would also pay 2 mana for it, and just discarding your opponent late game threat is.
Okay, maybe not late game, but let's say mid game. Like, this is when paying 3 mana for discard spell is really something you don't necessarily want to do.
Yeah, true.
But that has to be tested.
Yeah, I think you can make up a lot of situations where it's really good. You can make up a lot of situations where it's very bad, and it's just down to how often those situations happen. I'm probably in favor of this card, just for like general play experience. I think it looks pretty good, but we'll see how. I think especially since like you cannot play all discard spells. Like 4 might still be good enough, but like you could not play like 20 of them. So
right.
Let's see what if every black deck. No, it's not every black deck that plays those cards, but most do. And if every one of those wants a 4th one, or CMC1.
Yeah, it will be interesting.
Another cleave spell we haven't talked about is Wash Away.
That's right. And I wanted to keep that until the end.
Oh, okay.
No, it's totally fine. I was just joking. It's probably the best cleave spell we've got for our format, or for any 1v1 commander format, I would say.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Especially because the card is it's not only targeting commanders, but there are so many abilities that, like, not only abilities stick to creatures these days, like Elite Spellbinder or Spell Queller or whatsoever, but also stuff like spells cast from Adventure, Suspend, Cascade, etc., etc. So the cards or anything that's cast from Graveyard, Escape casts, and whatsoever. So there are many more targets than just your commander, and later on you can just pay 3 mana and counter any spell.
Yeah, I think the countering for 3 is similar to the discard spell. It's kind of you take that, but that's not great. But yeah, in general, you will always find a commander to counter, especially with like cheap partners gone. The value of those cards really gone up. Like if your opponent is playing like 1 single commander, it's usually CMC 3 or 4, and then countering for 1 is insane.
Right.
It can almost be a game-winning tempo swing.
Right. Yeah. But
And yeah,
I think in comparison to the discard spell, having a reactive spell played for 3 mana is better than the proactive one.
yeah, of course,
Right. So yeah, I'm a great fan of it. But again, kids, be aware of the mental misstep. The next spell that is very, very interesting is by invitation only. So I think you would ask now, why is it an interesting spell? Because it's CMC5? Well, maybe because it's the best CMC5 disruption spell, Martin?
Yeah, it's probably the best CMC5 board wipe. There's like the legend one, but that exiles all non-impermanents that aren't legendary, but don't think that card is too great. And this one looks pretty nice. You go around indestructible and regeneration, since you just sacrifice them all. And you can also do some funny business, like if you have 2 creatures and your opponent only has 1, you can make them sacrifice 1 and you only have to sacrifice 1 and you keep your best one. Or do the same thing with 3 creatures on board in the number 2.
Yeah.
That can be at least like fine. I don't think this card is like auto-include, but it's something to consider.
I think the last, maybe I'm not sure if we discussed this on the channel, but we definitely talked about it. Isn't it called Doomscar, the one you can foretell?
Yeah, true. That one,
Yeah.
maybe that one is slightly better. Like Doomscar is, I don't think it's that great because we don't really have a mana rock deck in Duel Commander at the moment. I think it's pretty good there.
Yeah.
Because you can play your turn 3 mana rock and then play this. It's pretty good usually. And also you can cast it on turn 3 if you just foretell it on turn 2. But
it
yeah,
costs 3. Yeah, right.
yeah. But both those cards are, they're fine. Maybe if your deck needs something like this in the situations where those cards come up a lot, you maybe want those cards. Maybe in a deck that has both a controlling game plan and a go might go game plan. Maybe then by invitation only is your choice of board wipe.
Yeah. Next up, we have to talk about the Slowlands. I was very surprised that Wizard finished the cycle. Maybe you knew about that. I did not.
Well, it's something they've started doing with they finished the revealed cycle and they pretty quickly finished what's the other cycle they recently printed? The magic double face cards cycle. That one finished in the next set, and yeah, this one also got finished in the next set, which is nice because we all hate non-finished dual land cycles.
Right. Especially if you play like 3-color enemy piles, like, I don't know.
Yep.
Sultai, Jeskai, whatsoever.
It's not great.
No. And I think we agree on these lands are great for 2-color and 3-color decks so far.
Yep. They're not the best, not the worst.
Exactly.
Yeah. If your deck doesn't really like check lands, it's probably a very good choice. And yeah, if you just want more non-basic dual lands and if you have a lot of color requirements, they usually do pretty well.
Yeah, right. By the way, what about the Manaform Hellkite? There's a new CMC4 dragon.
Hey,
it's
our favorite deck, the Dragon.
Definitely
like one.
Yeah, I think this deck gets more and more aggressive dragons printed, and at some point we will be able. I mean, we've already tried that. I think we've played it on cam once, but Kinky has brewed a more controlish version.
Yeah.
But you could easily fit like a bunch of dorks into this deck and then play all the CMC4 dragons, and then you have like dork into turn 2, 4/4, do whatever dragon buddy, which is not a bad thing for aggressive decks, I guess.
Yeah. We're just getting closer and closer to the day this card will also be banned. Just like all its brothers and sisters in the Eminence ability.
Yeah.
But we're still pretty far away from it. It's currently like not a great deck. Or it's borderline playable. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And yeah, every CMC4 for Dragon really helps.
That's right. Apart from that, there might be some Izzet decks like Real that, like in a special build, they might utilize this card as well.
Yeah, the synergy with 3 spells is pretty nice. So
Right.
if you play a deck that plays proactive free spells, not the counter magic because you have to sacrifice string in the end step, you can maybe do some shenanigans with some free spells and use, especially like real a deck that draws a million cards if it gets going. Really wants those cards anyway, so maybe this works in that deck, but I think the deck has other issues rather that are not related to finishing games.
Yeah, correct. Maybe it's time for Gutshot again. Let's see. I think the last card we have to talk about, that's really like I think that's the most influential for Duel Commander or other 1v1 formats like Archon probably as well, because you can play Ragavan there, and nevertheless the Red Cemetery is like a very, very great print, I guess.
Yeah. It's Ankh of Mishra on a stick, basically.
Yeah, and it's a flexible one, right? So
yeah, it has even more upside. And I think like the main issue with Ankh always was that you don't really want to spend your turn 2 not casting a creature.
yeah, correct.
And also you want to play it as early as possible because you want to get as many land drops in as possible with this card on the battlefield from your opponent.
Yeah, definitely. And it even has first strike. That's great in combat.
Yeah.
At least against smaller creatures. And since there are some Levio decks around with Malcolm or Crown or something like this, or even with Tevesh, and most 2-drops have like 2 toughness, because as you already said, the times with the partners are over. There's no Thrasios you need to fear anymore. Back in the days, any toughness 1 body was with power 2 was quite meh, because of the fact that your opponent has the better blocker. But here we go.
Yeah, it's maybe not like insane, but definitely a good upgrade for maybe some weirder 2-drop cards in red deck wins. So I think this should be an upgrade.
Yeah, I do think so as well. The only problem is that, let's see how the carry deck develops over the next few months, because I think the last influential card was the Bloodthirst Adversary from the Innistrad set. Not Innistrad. Midnight Hunt, I guess it was. Which was also a CMC2 drop, and all those cards somehow compete with the Kari cast as well.
Maybe it's time to switch to Layla, because the 2-drops are just that good.
Yeah, that could be one thing, exactly. Otherwise it might get a bit clunky, like not casting your stuff on curve and not using your mana to the full potential in this very early turns is a crucial thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty important for mono red.
Yeah, but apart from that, I think the set covered quite some interesting cards.
Yeah, it's no Modern Horizon 2.
No, that's not. But like, we haven't talked about the last set because we thought, well, there was maybe the cycle of adversaries, but apart from that, there weren't many interesting cards that would also like either interact with, for example, Wash Away interacting with the command zone while still appearing in a standard set. Yeah, but also just overall not that many powerful cards, I think. At least.
Yeah, this deck is set is on like the upper mid-range area of the sets. I think it has a few good cards. And yeah, we don't get a lot of good commanders from this one, but a lot of good cards for your 99. Or at least a few.
Right. And maybe that's even a good thing to not have that many commanders, because the potential of having some disruptive commanders printed is quite high these days, I would say.
Yeah.
So let's bet
maybe it's time for a ban list update without like 4 cards banned, but we will see.
Yeah, I agree. But let's see what the committee has in mind. Until then, if we're talking about the committee or the ban list update, soon we will have another metagame breakdown, talking about the current metagame and looking at potential bans and unbans. I think we will mainly talk about unbans, because this is the more interesting topic and something that's
a bit more optimistic.
Yeah, and also I think it's time to unban some cards, to release some stuff from the list. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I think there are a couple of cards that are obsolete, but let's debate about it another day.
Yeah.
So far, Thanks for listening. Thanks for
Yep.
tuning in, and have a good one.
See you next time.